I'm George Nordhaus, and welcome to Monday Morning. Monday morning is going to be different. It's different every week, but it's something that I'm really intrigued with in many, many ways, and you'll see why in a minute. We're going to be talking to Patrick Armstrong, CPCU, who is with Resource Pro. I better get that right, hadn't I? Resource Pro. And, of course, you probably know what Resource Pro is, but you're going to learn it in just a minute. There's Patrick. Patrick is Vice President of Business Development at Resource Pro. I'll get it right. Hey, Patrick, how long has Resource Pro been in business?
We've been in business 10 years.
Gosh, I remember it. I had your president, Dan Epstein. I guess he formed it, didn't he? I think he was the formation guy.
He started with Resource Pro shortly after we were founded, and has kind of been responsible for building out our client base in the early days, and became the CEO. And has been leading the company ever since.
Oh, he's done a wonderful job. I had him at one of my conventions for something I had, Group 500, and it was just, you guys had just started, and people going, what the heck is this guy talking about? And now, of course, everybody knows, or they soon will. You've been in it 20 years, holy macro. Where were you an agency? Where were you principal?
I was an agent in Western Massachusetts with the Tool Insurance Agency.
Oh, yeah, I remember the Tool Agency. And then you were a reinsurance broker. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I started with a facultative reinsurance brokerage in New York City.
Wow.
Before I joined the independent agency world.
I got you. You graduated from the College of Insurance. It's now St. John's University. And what's that other thing in there? You're a recipient of what?
Yeah, I was the proud recipient of the George Nordhaus Memorial Scholarship, which I know, George, you know that well, but for those listening that may not know, that is a scholarship that George and his wife started in honor of their late son. And so I was privileged at the time to have a chance to fly out to San Francisco and join the folks at the IMMS convention. And as a young guy just starting in the business, it was a real eye-opener for me, especially as far as understanding what the world of the independent agency business was all about. So I never imagined that I'd continue to be in contact with George all these probably almost 30 years later.
You're not that old. I am, but you're not. That's amazing. Well, we were happy to have you, and it was a wonderful opportunity for us to show our appreciation of Jeff. At any rate, let's go forward here and talk about what is Resource Pro. What's this all about? Profitability, inside job. What do you mean?
So, George, I first just thank you for inviting me to join you this morning, and I do certainly appreciate all the opportunities I have to talk to you, but today is no exception. At Resource Pro, we have an unnatural passion for insurance operations, and so today I'd like to share some of that passion with you. Most people don't realize that right now, at this time in our industry's development, operations is where the action is, and why we see that profitability is an inside job. But to get to a discussion about profitability, we first want to look at what life is like inside a typical agency today. What are the objectives, the challenges, the opportunities? When we look inside, we usually see one common characteristic, and that is pressure. Lots and lots of pressure. There's pressure on margins from rising expenses and downward pressure on commissions, pressure to execute on value-added services to justify fee income, pressure to hire and train new production staff. There's pressure to implement new systems, pressure to differentiate, pressure to manage an increasingly diverse and aging workforce. In short, there's a lot of pressure in this business.
Well, that's for sure, and particularly in marketing, which is my bag. Unbelievable pressure.
That's right. It's changing. Hourly it's changing, especially in the marketing side.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressure that agencies and their staff are feeling is increasing. In a 2013 Insurance Journal Resource Pro study, we found that 70% of agency personnel described that their workload had increased over the prior 3 years. And they gave a number of reasons for that rising workload, as we show in this slide.
I believe it.
To manage that increasing workload, service professionals tell us that they're doing a few things. One, putting in more overtime hours. They're also, in some cases, just living with backlogs. And finally, they tell us that they're often dealing with the most urgent items first, which is often at the exclusion of more important items. And there's a disconnect here because management often doesn't see clearly the burden that these service professionals are under or how it's impacting them personally. For example, 60% of managers said that backlogs were not an issue in their agency, while only 36% of service staff agreed. So what this tells us is that 2/3 of staff are struggling with backlogs that management may not even be aware of. And so it begs the question, what E&O risk, service, or relationship issues, are building up just under the surface? And what's happening to staff morale? Well, there's disagreement there too. Management and staff report different perspectives on morale, with almost 50% of staff disagreeing that morale is high in their organization. And though morale is intangible, it's not something we can run a report on, we do know that it affects culture, which affects staff motivation, which affects service quality, which affects retention, which in turn affects profitability. The deceptively simple solution, as we see it, to reducing pressure and relieving workload is to increase capacity so people can focus on being the insurance professionals they truly want to be. And increasing capacity is ultimately about enabling growth. Because when you're running at or beyond capacity, it's tough for someone to handle 5% more, or 10%, or 20% more accounts or business. When this happens, we become service constrained. We simply can't grow if we can't service. And it's here that we see some tactics in play that often compound this pressure rather than alleviating it. When we talk with agencies, we often see three main approaches agencies use to push through these constraints in order to increase capacity and fuel growth. One is they hire new producers and specialists to drive new sales and get into new verticals. Secondly, they invest in technology to automate tasks that are performed by their people. And finally, they look to M&A as a way of adding growth directly to their P&L, to gain access to new markets and create the promise of scale efficiencies. While each of these are important initiatives in their own right, they don't solve the core issues. In fact, we often see that they add to them. This is because they all involve bolting on more assets, more people, more systems, more accounts, each with their own unique way of operating, when the core business, how we prioritize, process, and manage, often lacks the standardization, transparency, metrics, and efficiency you would want. Mm-hmm. This leads us to what we see as the most neglected opportunity in the industry: reducing waste. Reducing waste is the gold that is hidden in every agency's backyard. So what do I mean by waste? Well, lean theory, which was developed by Toyota, offers a simple definition by differentiating it from value-added and necessary work. And so to kind of understand this, think about all of the activities that are performed by your staff and how much time they spend on them. Now go visit your clients and ask them which of these activities would they be willing to pay for. That's the value-added work, the things that your clients will pay you to do. That's what drives growth and differentiation to your business. You want your people doing as much of this as they can. Then there's a bunch of work that you just simply have to do for compliance reasons, things like policy delivery or issuing certificates. That's your necessary work. The goal here is to do it as efficiently and cost-effectively as possible. And then there's waste. According to Toyota and Lean Theory, 50% of all activity is waste. It's activity that simply adds cost and should be eliminated. Think about all the busy work you or your people are doing inside a typical agency. The interruptions, the rekeying of data, the follow-ups, corrections, all the little emergencies, or the overly long meetings. You start to get a sense for where waste is present. And as we said in the opening, the impact of these factors is typically an incredible amount of pressure on the agency.
That's some slide.
And that pressure is evidenced in, when I think about it, I think of the song that the rock band Queen made popular in the 80s called Under Pressure. And I was recently reminded of that song while visiting with a commercial lines manager at a mid-sized suburban agency. And she started to share with me what her typical day is like. She said she arrives early to get a jump on the day before others come into the office. She gets settled, goes through her email, checks her calendar, sets up her voicemail greeting, and then, as she put it, it's all downhill from there. She went on to describe late arriving or absent staff, impromptu meetings, urgent requests from clients, technology challenges, last-minute binding of accounts, reviewing expiration reports, chasing down renewal quotes for producers, and sort of on and on. And as she spoke, her voice became louder and her tone less calm. Her eyebrows lifted, exaggerating the tiredness that I already could see in her eyes. Although we had enjoyed a very relaxed conversation for about an hour leading up to this, the pressure she felt as she described her job was undeniable. And sensing this pressure and this tension, one of the agency principals in the room kind of reached his arm out and offered a suggestion, and she quickly shot back, "There's no time for that. There's never any time." And we've seen this play out in hundreds of agencies, George. It's common, it's real, we know it's there, but it is not necessary. It really just does not have to be this way. And in fact, it's not always this way. Some agencies are more productive than others. According to the 2012 Big I Best Practices study conducted by Reagan, top quartile agencies are between 30 and 50% more productive than average performers in the study. So what does reducing waste do, and how is it relevant? Well, it improves productivity systemically, driving efficiencies across the organization. Here's a way of thinking about it. There's a concept called spread per employee that is basically revenue per employee minus compensation per employee. This spread gives you the contribution that each employee is making to the organization. In this chart, we're looking at the spread for agencies of 5 to 10 million in revenues. They show a $25,000 or 46% gap in productivity per employee. For a 50-person agency, this represents $1.25 million in additional contribution.
Wow.
For a retail broker operating at a 20% margin and a 15% average commission, That's like adding $41.6 million in additional premium. We simply don't know of a faster way to drive profitable growth than to improve productivity per employee. And you see this reflected in the wide disparity of profit margins in the business. When the best in class are achieving greater than 30% margins, and most everyone else is trailing below 15%. So how does waste show up within an agency? If you consider typical culprits like missing or incorrect information and some others listed on this slide, you start to get an idea. But let me share a real example of this in action.
Okay.
Productivity Solutions Group is Resource Pro's advisory practice. Our PSG team conducted an analysis of one of our clients' renewal workflow. This was a $30 million commercial lines unit that had an average compensation cost of $40 per hour, and they were servicing 4,000 accounts.
Wow.
They found it took the agency on average 36 hours to renew an account. We were able to help them identify 4 hours of process savings by standardizing ad hoc tasks, templating certain letters, and segmenting accounts. Then we found another almost 4 hours that could be delegated to lower cost people within their own organization. All told, this represented $1 million just in direct process savings. So let's dig a little deeper by looking at an example of how waste shows up in a new business workflow. George, this slide is kind of the way managers see the new business workflow. So we see here is a simple system that requires information be delivered to the right person who moves it through the process and results in a proposal. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the proposal is accepted and results in an order to bind. This is the way managers see the process. And in a perfect world, most people would agree that this looks just about right. But what we actually see when we visit agencies is something completely different. We see a process rife with missing information, incomplete data, errors, inconsistency, unpredictability, and we see a process interrupted by phone calls, billing questions, producer emergencies that have to be handled right now, vacations, absenteeism, turnover, and a host of human resource conditions. For an average agency that is able to find 20% waste in their activities, and for context, remember Toyota's research suggests that 50% waste is included in all activity. If an agency is able to just find 20% waste and can convert that waste into productive growth capacity, they can increase their EBITDA margin by 83%.
Wow. That's huge. That ought to be a great sales, I guess. That's your number one sales argument, huh? Yeah.
There's certainly some motivation behind that. That's right. So to kind of help an agency think about how to look at waste, how to find it, and turn it into productive capacity, we offer kind of 5 practice areas that will reduce waste and boost productivity. The good news is that none of these are rocket science. You know, everybody could kind of start on this today if they were so inclined. The first is defining your mission and strategic objectives so your people know how to prioritize between alternative actions and investments. Secondly, you want to make your processes visible to streamline workflows and root out waste. And then enhance how you segment accounts by creating detailed service levels by revenue, contribution, by maybe complexity or profitability. Fourth, delegate or outsource non-core tasks to processing specialists. Just a plug for a book. It's not a It's not a new book. It's been around a while. But if you want to think about how to trade non-core tasks for core tasks, there's a book by Jeffrey Moore called Dealing with Darwin that really kind of takes you through how to do that, and highly recommend it to somebody interested in thinking about how this might fit into their organization. And then finally, manage and track your critical success factors. And we're not talking about just capturing financial metrics, but track real operational performance. Find the things that are important to your agency and start to track them. So it might be things like submission to quote or quote to bind. It might be it could be your retention rate by policy type. But start looking at real operational performance and use that to manage your business. And these 5 things really, George, are about creating alignment within and throughout your business. And for years, agencies and their employees have been following the advice of Nike, which is to just do it. Resource Pro is a slightly different take on this concept. We would challenge those of you listening today to stop just doing it and start doing what counts. So let's take a look at what we mean by do what counts and how Resource Pro can help. This graph shows some of the things that are going inside a typical agency. You'll see that these 2 illustrations are dissected by a horizontal line that is labeled value. And we call that the value line. The work above that is accretive to your business. The work below that is just a net cost. And at Resource Pro, we partner with agencies to help them move out of the routine processing work, which is below the value line, and get their people focused on the things that are going to drive growth and profitability to the agency. So we believe that by partnering with Resource Pro, you can reduce the aggregate amount of processing. So you'll see that green box below the value line gets smaller as you move people up above the value line. And that happens because of streamlining and workflow improvements that occur as a normal byproduct of the delegation relationship with us. But then you're going to retain some of that. Some just has to be retained. It's just things that you need to do. You're not going to get rid of all processing, but you're going to take the time that we replace and you're going to move those people up to providing more proactive service, account rounding, any of the things that differentiate you or drive your business. If you were able to take an hour of routine processing work and give that back to an account manager, an account executive, or a producer, or even your finance person, what could they do with that extra hour? How many more accounts could they service in a week or in a month? How much revenue could they generate with those freed up hours?
Got it.
And if you want to start creating this time, most of our clients bring us in kind of on the left of this chart in that tactical capacity space. They bring us in to solve a tactical problem they have or to free up time from specific activities. Once they build confidence in the process, the agency staff gets comfortable in the work that we do, they'll often begin to look at steps on either side of a task and start to functionalize the work that we do, which improves the overall workflow efficiency and increases the impact to the agency. As we move through the evolution that we call the 3 levels, and is illustrated on this slide, we become a more strategic tool over time that the agency uses to drive efficiency across the organization at all levels of employee and across departments. This is not a silver bullet that we offer, but it is a proven process for transforming agencies and enabling them to get the most from their people. And this shows up in our mission.
What is your mission?
which is all about helping agencies move their people to their best and highest use and helping them become the insurance professionals we believe they really want to be.
Well, let me ask a couple of questions here. Of course, you're taking over we always just used to say, well, that's the back room. You guys are doing the back room. I don't know if you hear that all the time, don't you?
Yeah, sure.
I guess it is, right. General, and your back room is in China.
That's right.
You have one or two people working for you in China, don't you?
Yeah, we do. We have about 1,700 people in 3 processing centers in China. And George, just to answer the question about the back room,
yeah.
It used to be that we would say, yeah, we handle your back office, and there was a day that agencies truly had a back office. There was a real clear delineation of responsibilities between agencies and carriers.
Mm-hmm.
There's no clear delineation anymore, George. There's really no back office. I kind of call it the all office. There was a day when agencies took applications and carriers rated and quoted, agencies presented and sold, and carriers bound and issued. Those activities are happening inside an agency today in a completely different way than they were even just 20 years ago. So some of the things that we used to think of as back office are just part of the everyday workflow today. So you have highly compensated account executives doing things that there were whole departments within insurance carriers 30 years ago doing.
All right, let me have one last question. I'll bet when people start with you, they never leave.
Yeah, it's interesting. In outsourcing in general, and we are not a typical outsourcing company, but if you just kind of looked at that industry, there's about a 51 or 52% failure rate. So a little more than half of all engagements are brought back in-house by the client because they just don't get the value they expected.
Mm-hmm.
At Resource Pro, we have a 97% success rate.
Wow.
So we've been fortunate, and so far so good.
Well, I have never heard one bad thing said about you guys, and I don't know what I would tell you if I did, but I haven't. Patrick, I'm proud of you. You've got a long way from the College of Insurance back many, many years ago. How can people get hold of you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me via email at patrick@resourcepro.com or by calling my office at 937-660-9271.
Right.
We also have a website that has loads of information. If you do reach out, I'll be more than happy to put you in touch with somebody that can have a conversation.
Well, listen, thank you very much for everything you've done, and for the rest of you, don't forget to go back to your email, and you can find out the E&O tip of the week, and you can go find out the quiz flash, and you can get the archived programs of all of these. We've got like 50 this year, I think, so far, or something. 50's on there. Be 80 before the end of the year. But again, Research Pro is a really good organization, and that's why I wanted them to come on here, and I'm so glad they did. Patrick, thank you again, my friend, and I'll be seeing you and talking to you, and when you get out to Santa Fe, you can see me. Okay? Talk to you later.
I look forward to it. Thanks, George.
It'll be fun.